Okay, so let's get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to one of my special guest spaces where I bring someone over to talk about a particular topic, mostly tech related. For today, we have Sarah Rainsberger over to talk about making documentation developers love. And like I said, it falls in the ballpark of DevRel, Docs Engineer, and if you writing any form of technical content for developers, she definitely have a lot to say on that. So I'm going to let her introduce herself right now, and we're going to kick off from that note. So hi, sir.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and thanks everybody for showing up to listen.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
I'll give a super quick introduction. I'm currently the docs lead at Astro. Astro.build is the Twitter handle. So yeah, for the last almost a year, that's been pretty much my domain is working in docs at Astro. So open source docs, docs for developers, and it's been a great experience. And I think we're doing some fun and cool stuff over there. So I'm happy to share what we're doing and some of the things I've learned and some of the ideas that I try to follow and live up to while I'm making developers docs.
Mm, interesting. Thank you, sir. So yeah, I know Astro, great dogs you guys have, but we are going to backtrack a bit. Backstory leading up to Astro. So I would like to start on the note of like what were you doing before Astro or before being Docs lead?
Yeah, well, in my past career,
Mhm.
I was actually a tutor. So I was a high school, university math tutor, English tutor. And let me tell you, if there's any role that prepares you for approaching something from another person's perspective, it's tutoring.
Mhm.
So yeah. So my past life and pretty much where I developed most of my skills comes from, sitting across the table with someone else who has a problem that needs to be solved or who has a thing that they're trying to figure out. Um, yeah, and I think that has prepared me well for working in the documentation space, because in tutoring, it is 0% about what you know or what you can do. And its only purpose is to help someone else learn something or solve their problem.
Mhm.
And I even more I find, um, is that when you're tutoring, there's no audience. You don't tutor for an audience. Your tutoring doesn't go up on a website somewhere. So there's no one to show off to, right? Like you're not doing this for yourself. You are so focused on helping someone else, that I mean, there's only the other person in the room that you're communicating to. And so I bring that to my current work of docs lead and editing and wrangling open source contributors, in that whenever I'm writing, my challenge is to recreate and recapture that experience and to live up to it. And it's not about me. It's about the person that I'm trying to communicate to.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense, and I am starting to see where all the empathy on the docs is coming from because I I also have a background in teaching, so I have taught like little kids how to play the piano and also just like reading and writing, and I've also taught like I was a tutor for a computer science program way back. So I think I understand how tutoring could influence how you work on docs or just write great technical content. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that, Sarah. So um, I have a series of questions. Of course, like I said, I'm gonna ask some. So the first thing I have is, what is the why of documentation? Like, why do we even write documentation, and why do we even need a docs lead and DevRel and technical writing? Like, what is the why from your experience?
Um, for me, I think of docs primarily as support. So if you're asking why do we need docs, then I would say, well, consider the parallel question, why do we need support? And then I think the answer becomes a little more obvious that docs are helpful to our users because they can convey the information that we aren't there to tell them in person. Docs are helpful to the developers of a product because if you can't clearly articulate what your product does or why this feature exists, then that can actually point to problems with design in the product itself. Um, Docs are also used internally. So docs are a good source of truth, externally for your users and internally for your own developers. Docs can be a collective memory so that it's easier to onboard new people. In open source, it's easier to accept new contributions because people who want to contribute to your open source project have a place they can go to see, even if they can't learn everything about your product and your process, they can find some of the main things that will help them get their contribution integrated more quickly. So a big part of it is support. A big part of it is collective memory, and there are some products. If you have an open source project yourself and you don't have a big marketing site for it, this is your little hobby project. You probably have a README. READMEs are documentation. So your README is not only helping your users learn about and use your product, it's a marketing tool as well. So for many people, docs are also their marketing. So they can play a huge multifaceted role in a product.
Wow, thank you. So docs primarily are for support, and not just for the users, but also for the builders of these products. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, docs can help everyone involved in no matter what they're trying to do, whether they're trying to learn, they're trying to build, they're trying to contribute. Um, they're trying to talk their friends into using your project. Having good docs is something that they can point to say, oh yeah, you'll be fine. Here, you can go to the docs, you can figure it out.
Hmm, nice. Thank you. That's that's amazing. And I like the part where you mentioned about docs being like a marketing tool. Like, do you want to talk about that some more? Because I know docs could be products, but I haven't really thought about it from the perspective of it being like a marketing tool.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things are documentation that we don't think of as documentation. So, READMEs are documentation, code comments are documentation, change logs and release notes are documentation. Sometimes blogs, sometimes a company will put out a blog post to accompany, a new release. That's all documentation. And if your documentation is good, it can function as marketing. because it instills confidence in the people who are going to use your product that it's maintained, because they see change logs, they see a README with an updated version of dependencies on it. So they're like, okay, yeah, they've updated their product recently because they discovered that this needed updating. So even if it's not traditional marketing-y speak, your docs really can function as marketing. And in some cases, you go to a product's website and they have a main landing page and their docs are integrated with that page. Sometimes they're indistinguishable from their marketing. At Astro, we do have a separate site for docs, and then our main astro.build is a different site, but that's maybe not even the most common pattern. So absolutely, your docs, even if they are not strictly speaking marketing material, they are functioning that way. So if you're not paying attention to what your docs are doing from a marketing and advertising standpoint, then you are missing out a little bit on an opportunity.
Yeah. Wow. I, the space just started, and I'm just having aha moments. This is great. This is good. So right now I can't take off my mind the marketing of the dogs, but I'm going to come back to that, right? Because most developers that I know, I think we've heard it when people tend to, if they want to learn in the technology, for example, they want to gravitate to like a third party blog post or a YouTube channel, and they are scared of the docs for some reason. I'm not. I love the docs. But have you seen this happen? And what do you think of it? Like, why does that happen?
Well, that can happen for a bunch of reasons, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think I watched 3 different YouTube videos yesterday of people doing their own little Astro introductions or tutorials or walk through a specific task. Um, so yes, it happens, and in part because docs, when done well, have a lot of stuff on them, and it can, if you're not ready for the fact that maybe the docs are actually pretty good, it's entirely reasonable, and it's a good idea to go to YouTube and say, oh, I need to know how to do authentication in Astra, so let's see if somebody's put out a video about it. Because in that case, if you're wanting to learn about something, you probably do want that kind of information. You want someone to show you how to do something. You don't want somebody to market Astro to you. You don't necessarily want to look at API reference docs because you're not there yet. You don't have the right vocabulary yet for that kind of stuff. So one thing that we do pay attention to in docs is the goal of the reader when they arrive, and making different types of documentation or education material at all, depending on what that situation is. Um, so some material will be guides, will be guided, walking through a very specific thing that you want to accomplish. And some of the docs on the doc site will be, what is this island's architecture anyway? Like, what's that all about? And someone who wants to learn a very specific thing doesn't really want to get into our philosophy and jive with us for a little bit about, all the philosophical underpinnings of Astra. So when docs are done well, they help the reader figure out where they want to go to do what they want to do. And so if you see a third party YouTube video that is doing the exact thing you want to do, you should go there. And that's great. They've done that. They've helped docs. They've helped someone get over one particular problem, when the purpose of our documentation is to cover a lot. We have to cover the people who are just coming to look up, hey, what's this API endpoint? Oh, I got this error message. What does that mean? So it's not a competition at all between the content creators. We all help each other with that. but it really does speak to purpose. And I can say, if you're not coming to AstroDocs, then I think you are missing out on how friendly and helpful our docs are super trying to be. So you don't need to be scared of our docs, but again, it's, has the person creating the docs had this mindset of, I need to think about what people will want to do when they land on this page. And if they've thought about it, then docs is a great experience.
Yeah. So I think I get you. So the YouTube videos, the articles, and the guides that are not on the docs, they're mostly augment the docs because clearly and realistically um you can't provide for all the use cases there might be because some of them would be niched down. So and all these people they have maybe tried it out and they found out how it worked and they actually put out content. So it complements the docs, not a competition, like you said. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, and I mean, so when we think about, if we think about going back to tutoring, right? Like, you were a tutor, I was a tutor. When you're working with someone face to face, you get feedback right there. Am I telling you the right thing? Have I gone too far? Am I going off the rails? Docs, when we're writing and creating them, we're trying to substitute that feedback with like a bunch of other things like writing and style guides to make sure that, you know, we remember decisions we've made about how we should structure the docs and keep them consistent. You know, we substitute having someone there giving us a confused look with automated tools and processes like spelling and grammar checkers, but also like a Hemingway app that'll catch when our language is too convoluted. Or we substitute someone's eyes glazing over with like theory about what the brain can handle and keeping our sections short. So there's a bunch of stuff we do when creating docs that we have to do without immediate feedback of who's using them. So we do have to plan for a broader audience and multiple audiences all at once. Yeah, so any third party content out there is great because it just helps put more out there that might reach more people trying to do specific things.
Got you. Yeah, that actually makes sense. And while you were explaining, I'm already seeing the details you take on documentation, like from tone, and I think I want to talk about that just a little bit. So, where do you draw the line in the tone of a documentation? So, because you don't want to sound too informal and too formal. So, how do you get, like, what is the fine line for you when you craft documentation? Either it's API references or guides.
Yeah, it's always something tough to balance, and we always have conversations amongst ourselves as doc writers, sending each other little messages like, okay, is this too many exclamation points? What are we like? It is a balance because one thing we keep in mind, and this is what tries to guide our tone, is that much of the time people are arriving at your docs frustrated or confused. They're coming because they hit a problem and they're trying to find a solution. Some people are coming fresh and they're coming to learn and they're in a good headspace. Um, some people do, but our standard comment is most people don't read documentation like a book. They're not settling in with a cup of tea and a blanket trying to get cozy. So we use the guiding principle that if someone is frustrated, if someone is confused, if someone's in a hurry, they don't want jokes, right? You don't want to be, making light when someone is in a difficult situation. So you want to be more than anything reassuring. And that means different things to different people. And it can be difficult to standardize that. But I would say the tone of docs that we go for is reassuring. Stuff might be going wrong. It's okay. And reassuring does, I think, mean a tiny bit more casual than dry. So we're not super formal. We're not like friendly party vibe, because you might be having a problem. And it might seem like you have a problem, but we're just over here partying and we want to avoid that. So I would say the tone we go for is friendly with the goal of being reassuring. You should be able to come here and feel comfortable and feel supported. That's that's the best we can do.
Nice. So reassuring. That is the tone. I like it. So yeah, going back to my list of questions. So this might take us a little bit down this route where we talk about the dogs and the role it plays in the product or the technology. So what in a dog might make or break a product or a technology in terms of how it's written, structure, accessibility, or any other factor?
Ooh, good question. Um, so certainly there are a ton of things to keep in mind when making docs. Um, in the spirit of being reassuring, if you maybe you're listening and you've got an open source project and you are thinking of writing docs, I'm not going to overwhelm you by saying if your docs don't have this, this, and this, they are unsuccessful. Your project is doomed to fail. What I will say is your docs, first and foremost, have to be clear and have to be correct. So these are the two main words that we use with the Astro docs. When I started there and when we started doing content audit, when we needed to put more pieces into place, we focused on being clear and being correct. People do not like incorrect documentation. So if you're going to put something in your docs, and remember, by docs, I'm including readmes and code comments and change logs, it had better be correct. Now, notice that I haven't said it has to be complete, because it doesn't. Because if you have something, if every single thing in your docs is clear and is correct, you may leave your reader wanting more, but you haven't enraged them with uh, typos or descriptions that don't make sense, or they've followed 12 steps to get to step 13, but that step doesn't work and they've invested so much in it already. So at Astro, I said we're going to start with focusing on what is clear and what is correct. And the nice thing about open source is if it's not complete, someone's going to tell you. They're going to file an issue, they're going to file a PR, and you will learn what is incomplete about your docs. And then you can tackle those by being clear and correct about them. Now, and if you're at the point where you have a good foundation, then your stretch goals become discoverable and navigable, which means so you've already got docs that are entirely correct and they're written well and anyone who reads them can understand them. The next challenge is, can they find the information they need to know? And if they land in your docs not in that spot, can they get to that spot? So once your docs are clear and correct, then at Astro, we focused on discoverability and navigability, because the clearest and most correct docs are not very helpful if someone can't get there. So we didn't talk about very, very specific things like accessibility or things like that yet. I mean, we're just talking very, very broad principles here. If you keep those 4 words in mind, you're going to have successful docs.
So to reiterate, those four words are clear, discoverable, navigable, right?
Yeah, and the most important one,
Right? Is that it?
well, I heard three from you. I
So
didn't hear
clear,
the
correct,
correct.
discoverable, and navigable.
Yeah, uh,
Wow.
correct is maybe the most important one. If
Okay.
anyone is going to get mad at your docs, it's going to first come from them being incorrect. So
Hmm.
that's a very, yeah, that's a very high level picture of what are you aiming for with the docs. That's a very high level of what should be my minimum goals.
Wow. This is a docs masterclass, yo. Sarah just giving us gold. Like, you should write a book on documentation, Sarah. Mhm. Really, this is amazing. So, yeah, I'm thinking of the pillars. I haven't even finished thinking of the one you talked about, the docs being marketing, like an agent of marketing for a product. And now you hit me with these four pillars of writing great docs, like I'm going to call them. And yeah, so let's let's leave the pillars aside first of all, right?
Okay.
And let's talk about mindset because I've always thought about whenever I sit down to write documentation or any piece of writing at all, my mindset is not for me. Like that is just first thing on it. Like not from my perspective, but who are these people that are going to read this documentation? What do they want to achieve? Or read this article or this tweet? Like, what is your mindset when it comes to writing great documentations, like the one you're doing at Astro?
Yeah, so attempting to understand your audience is important. I mean, in an ideal world, technical writing is like a conversation with your reader, but in docs, we don't get immediate feedback from that reader, and we don't really know who they are. And we have to prepare for the fact that several different kinds of people come, and yet we're only providing one resource that has to accommodate all of that. So I mean, I hesitate to speak as a technical writer because I haven't been doing this for years and years, and I hesitate to speak for technical writers, but I think of myself as a problem solving sidekick. And
Mm.
if you're in front of me, then I'm helping you solve that problem in real time, goes back to our tutoring background. And if you're not right in front of me, then I'm using every tool in my toolbox to try to pre-solve your problems with you. So I'm envisioning all the different people I could be trying to help through the docs, and I'm trying to provide content options for all of them. No one piece of documentation is gonna fit with everybody, so that's why we have different kinds of documentation for what the reader is trying to do, for their level of experience. So some content you write aimed more towards junior developers, some you might write more towards senior developers, but with any product, you could have very senior developers reading your docs who are just new to your product. So it's important too that you're not assuming everyone who's new is new in the sense of new to developing. They could just be new to your way of doing things, new to what your product does. So thinking about developer skill, the situation they're in, even the role that they're in, because not even everyone reading your docs is a developer. You could have a you could have a system administrator, you could have a project manager, you could have someone who's trying to evaluate your product on business reasons reading your docs. So while you can't prepare for everyone, you can make some reasonable assumptions, create some reasonable categories, and think, okay, how do I be problem solving sidekick for this user? How do I be problem solving sidekick for this user? And if your docs are discoverable and navigable, then the right people can get to the right sections of your docs to get what they need.
Wow, nice. So again, another good point is like you just made is not everyone reading the, and that's actually a cool thing to have in mind because we might, you know, just forget ourselves and just assume we're writing for like developers and all the jargons and all the technicalities we just put in there without thinking about okay, someone might be like a business person like that just doesn't want these jargons, right? So that's a good thing to have in mind, really. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's tough. I mean, it's not
Hmm.
easy because some people will be very experienced, and as you say, you don't want to you don't want to assume too little knowledge. So part of the strategy behind that, because you don't want to turn off a very senior developer with material that seems like it's geared towards someone who has very little experience. This is where, when I talked about navigability, concepts like uh, guardrails and off ramps.
Hmm.
So, part of the process with your docs in making them navigable is making it super easy for people to tell instantly whether they're on the right page or in the right section. And if they're not, get them out and get them to the right page. And if they are, keep them there because that's distracting too. Is if especially someone who is newer, who is reading through something and like every fourth word is a link to somewhere else, you're going to lose them because they're like, oh, I have to go click here and see what this means, or oh, I'm supposed to know what this means. So I mean, it's not easy. It's a challenge to incorporate everything at once. But these guardrails to keep people in a productive flow and off ramps to get them out and where they need to be quickly are also things that you want to keep in mind because you'll have so many different kinds of readers. Oh, got a little quiet there, so I'm not sure if I lost you.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Please go ahead.
No, no problem.
Yeah.
No, I think,
Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
you're talking about the
go ahead, go
guardrails
ahead.
on the off rails, right?
Yeah.
Got it. Got it. So you know the the thing most time I see is there are dogs that like you said, for every other word is a link, and I think maybe the mindset is to easily guard them to other pages where they might find more information, but I don't know what ratio is good enough to do that. What do you think?
Yeah, and well, and it does depend too on both the type of docs and so what you're assuming about your reader. When we built the tutorial for AstroDocs, so in our sidebar now we have our new tutorial. Almost nothing was linked until the very bottom of the page with a little resources section. So almost nothing in the text as you go through, because what you're assuming about your reader in that case is that it's, someone doing our introductory tutorial. It's someone who needs to follow steps in order, and it was written that way. Um, you do not want them leaving that page. You want them to, as quickly as possible, not lose focus and complete the steps they need to complete so that they've accomplished something. And you don't want them distracted by clicking a bunch of links. So in our tutorial, the number of links in text is super low. In other pages, in our more conceptual pages, like why Astro and what is island architecture all about, we would have a much higher rate of external links because someone's probably in an exploratory mindset. they're looking for information. They want to consume. They want to know about things. So we're going to provide them in context more links to let them go off and explore. It's not as important to keep the guardrails on in that situation. Um, and it may sound silly, but sometimes I will determine how many links go in a paragraph by how crappy it makes the page look when I read it.
Mm-hmm.
Because links looked at right, they're visually distracting. Um, you know, we'll do all kinds of funny things in docs, like choose words so that the line length looks perfect. We make a lot of these visual decisions uh, because it because of things that people won't even think about when they're reading, but that absolutely will affect their experience while they're reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. This. Are you all writing? Because I am. I have Notion open. I'm taking down notes. This is a master class, and I'm taking down notes. I I think you're right on the links because it is confusing. Not really confusing. It's distracting because when you mention something in your docs and you link somewhere, I think the initial reaction is to click on that link, and once that happens, the user has been derailed from the thought pattern, and maybe that link leads to another link and another link, and they just have tabs open if they are doing command click, and it might even take a while before they could get back to the mindset of really getting back to what they were trying to achieve. So it's an important factor to think about, really.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's absolutely it. And it's not some kind of selfish, oh, I want to keep them on our site, or oh, I want to keep them in my article. It really is some cognitive theory stuff about, multitasking and being in flow versus out of flow. So a as a shortcut, I tend to put more links at the top of the page than throughout the middle, assuming that if someone has landed on the top of the page, again, they need to know that they're in the right place for them. And the top of the page is a great place for someone to click a link if they're maybe not on the right page. Because we also don't know how people arrive into our docs. So you can have the absolute best landing page, getting started, whatever. But a lot of people are going to come into your docs through a search engine, and it won't necessarily even be the best link for what they were looking for. That's an entirely other thing. We've actually spent the last month at Astro dealing with a lot of data from not only site searches, but Google Analytics. So no matter where someone is in the docs, providing those off ramps, those escape hatches, are helpful. So when I think about when am I going to try to send somebody somewhere else, ideally it's when they landed here by mistake, and often that's the top of the page, or could be at the top of another big heading. So yeah, it's absolutely something that we think about, that we struggle with, and it's a never ending challenge.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I Writing great docs is hard, really, really. Like we just have to give it that. And you are doing a great job with the Astro team because Astro Docs is one of my favorite docs right now. And you didn't mention that most folks don't read docs like from top to bottom. I do. I do read a lot of documentation from top to bottom, and the only reason why I do that is how good the docs read and how simple, not simplistic. Because if it's simplistic, you're trying too hard to make the terms that are complex way simpler than it is. But if it's simple, you are focusing on the information that I need for each stage of the docs and giving it to me in chunks. And I just want to click on the next page, and I'm reading it like pros, really. So I do that for the Astro docs and a couple of other docs, but they are minimal documentations I could do that with because of how simple they read. And so for you, aside the astrodox, because you work on the astrodox, like What other docs inspired the way you write documentation, and what is in those documentation that you love?
So one of the docs that I do give a shout out to is GraphQL's Odyssey program. Their tutorials really inspired me as I was writing the Astro tutorial. Um, so the GraphQL tutorials are, they are a masterclass, and I, would love to eventually produce something that lives up to that. They're interactive. That's where I took my inspiration to write. We have little multiple choice quizzes sprinkled throughout the Astro tutorial. We've animated, when you get the right answer. We have, there are ways to check yourself as you go, and they break up prose and they break up instructions, because a lot of a tutorial is, okay, do this, now do this. Um, so the GraphQL Odyssey courses are amazing at that. That's something I always keep in mind as I'm designing docs. And the tutorials too did the Astro tutorial was a chance where I could take a little more flexibility with that, because you don't want multiple choice and confetti in your regular docs.
Mhm.
But yeah, I will absolutely give a shout out to them.
Yeah, sure thing. So I am going to comment the link to that. I think I grabbed the right one. So it's apollographql.com/tutorials, right?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Oh, cool, got it. Thank you. I think I should definitely have a read as well. See, so yeah, so now, what is the ideal ratio in your experience? The ideal ratio for show and tell in documentations?
Okay, again, I think there's a place for both, and I
Mm-hmm.
think one thing we struggle with, and we are still working on in the Astrodocs, is actually splitting up the show and the tell. I mean, they're both valuable. The challenge is the right person reading the right part of it. Um, so a lot of these questions about, well, how much should I do this or how much should I do that, really, at its essence, is a site architecture challenge. It's, how do I organize the information so that the people who want to see this or do this are there? Um, because some people love to be shown. uh, Lecturing at universities gets kind of a bad name. I always loved just sitting in my seat, sitting, taking notes, watching someone who knew their stuff tell me or show me something. I thought that was magical, but that's not very interactive. And it suited me, where I could just, sort of luxuriate in someone telling me stuff I was interested in. And not everybody works that way. And not everybody thinks that way about docs. Not everybody thinks that way about the product of the documentation they're reading. So that's the other thing to keep in mind too, is that sometimes our audience is there because they're using your product passionately, maybe for a hobby, and sometimes they're there because this is their job. And it might not be, a love affair with Astro, but it's okay, they need to use this to fulfill this requirement of their job. Those people are going to be in different mindsets. They might want, some people want to be just told something because it's quicker. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's about efficiency and expediency. So I think we have to remember too that some people are reading your docs because they want desperately to understand and to know about your product. Some people are doing it because they need to know about your product. And some people are doing it entirely for a different reason. They actually don't much care, but their website that they do really care about needs this bit of technology to run. So it's not even about, the technology or the product. It really is, how do I get my website working as quickly as possible? So again, it just all goes back to, can we anticipate all these different kinds of people who might be coming to our docs? And can we offer something to most of them? Probably not all of them, but can we offer something that is helpful to most of them?
Wow. So what stood out for me is the mindset. Like you said, some people are reading your docs because they want to, others because they have to, or others for totally, completely different reasons that maybe they don't really care about the product, but they need it for their businesses. So, how you write need to cater for as large as possible this set of people. Again, that's a lot of work, but you are
It is.
doing great on that.
It is.
Yeah, it is. It is deep work, and I love the how you think about it because it shows your thought process and you care about documentation. So I think that you have to care about docs to write great docs, and I think you do care. So I have just on the side, do you draw inspiration for writing technical docs elsewhere that's not technical?
Um, well, there's actually, so for the past few years, I belong to a community choir.
Okay.
And I'm on the executive there. And so, for those who might not be familiar with the term community choir, usually in our context at least, that means there's no audition. Anyone is welcome to show up, uh, and you have very, I guess, a lot like open source. You have no control over who shows up, over their commitment level, anything like that. And yet, stuff needs to be communicated to them so that they show up at the right place with the right material. They know when they have to arrive for a concert. They know what they should be wearing. They know what they should not be wearing. They know how to hand their music in at the end of the term so that we don't lose the sheet music. So in fact, before I started working with Astro, for the past 5 or 6 years, I have been the communications person for this local community choir. Um, and I sort of stumbled into this role in part because it's a huge, long established choir. So many people already just sort of knew how things worked. So there was never any documentation. There was very little instruction. They were like, people already know this. And I was like, no, I'm new here. I don't know this. And so I am the one that handles all the communication to our members to make sure they know when they should show up, what they should bring, when a rehearsal is canceled, what to do if they need to miss a rehearsal, all that kind of stuff. And I used to say, if only I could get paid to write all these choir emails, because my emails would have tables of content, and then they would have escape hatches. They would say, if you are not ordering a binder this term, congratulations, you're done with this email. You can stop reading here. And I would structure the emails that way so that I would give people off ramps, because there's a lot you have to tell people. So in fact, yes, in a way I am a uh, choir technical writer too.
Wow. Just wow, really. Like you'll be communicating a lot. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I actually asked that because I believe that we do not really work in silos, and a part of our life mostly spill into other parts. And I just want to see where you could, if you getting inspiration from other aspects of your life and how they apply to how you write the docs at Astro. And it is telling a lot because you have to communicate with these people, and a large part of docs is all about communication, right? You're telling people how to do stuff, and that's also what you do with the choir. That's that's amazing. So you you mentioned something about dock site architecture. So the basic form of dock site architecture 101. What is that?
Basic architecture is to, I would say it probably goes back to navigability.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say that comes even before discoverability. That in the worst case, if you're just starting out and you need to provide documentation for your side project, um, then your make sure your project README has contents in a sensible order. Start with, right, make it so they can navigate, so that the first thing they're going to do need to do is install your project, make or get it up and running somehow, or make their first call to that API. Make sure they can do that. That should be at the top of your README. Save the weird stuff, the more niche cases, for lower in the document, right? Make it easy for people to navigate through whatever content you're communicating to them. I think that if anything is 101, I would say that's 101.
Yeah, like that makes a whole lot of sense because even hierarchy of information plays a role here. Like you really want the first thing to be actually the first thing and not to go back to the first thing later on in the document and I'm left feeling like what just happened? Is this the first step or the second step? So like funny I've seen technical pieces like this and it's sort of confusing because I just felt like why wasn't this the first thing that I had to do?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will add one thing to that, is that even before installer gets started, is tell me what this thing is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, tell me what it
Yeah.
is and what and when I would use it. Because actually, I go into other docs a lot to grab a one-liner. Sometimes I need to describe something, so I'm like, oh, I'll go to the docs. Like, what's the elevator pitch? What's the one sentence description of what this thing is? And you would not believe how difficult it can be to find that sometimes. Put that at the top. Like, okay, what even is this thing? And then you can get into installing it.
Yes. As you mentioned that, I just went to the Treble Docs and see if we do have a one-liner because not to be called out. Yep, we do have one.
There you go. Of course.
Yeah.
You learned from the best.
Oh yeah, of course I did. The Astro Docs was like the ground zero for really knowing how to architect the Treble Docs because of course I reached out to you before I started the project and I just learned a lot. And one key thing that I would say, it might be trivial to people, but to me, I love it in documentations. And this is the next page and the previous page, right? So that that ability, because most times people go through docs in mobile, right? And we know our very fine sidebar it's really not that great on mobile because you have to click on the hamburger menu, and maybe click on some more drop downs to get to those
Mhm.
parts. Yeah, but something as trivial as those next and previous button at the bottom really helps navigation. So, what did you think about that? Like, I don't know if you had the same thought as I did on dogs for you to do that for the Astro dogs. Like, was it like a must have or just like nice to have?
Actually, those navigation buttons are from the original Docs template, which is even before me. So I can't speak to uh, exactly what they were thinking when they put them in there. But absolutely, you're right. This notion of being on mobile and dealing with different menus and how many clicks does it take, but then also like how much actual physical space do you have to include navigation is just a whole other challenge. Now, of course, you like the back and forth buttons because you read docs like a book. Um, but they are handy. Like we're just even having a conversation right now. We're adding a new, we've just added a new page to the AstroDocs that lists every single error you might get with their error code and a longer description and extra resources, where to go if you've got this error code. And there's actually a PR right now where we're making an individual page for each error message. And my comment was, on this, we're discussing, well, do we put a back to all errors button at the bottom of this? I said, because yeah, we have navigation and everybody's got a back button and they're really just going back, but it's just so handy if you're on your phone or your tablet or somewhere where you can just click and
Mm-hmm.
not have to use the back button. Because we're all scared of the back button, right? You never know
Mm-hmm.
what the back button's going to do sometimes, depending on where you are. I don't trust it. I'd rather
Mm-hmm.
have a button that tells me where I'm going. So yeah, it's an excellent point, and it's actually something we are honestly discussing right now.
Cool. Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one that like those patterns because those patterns, they're my favorite things on any documentation that have it. I just love the docs for having it. Yeah. So let's see. So we've talked about a lot about navigable. So let's talk about discoverable, which by I think one should be search. How do you architect search for the docs? Like what how do you make search or make the docs searchable? Of course, we use something like a Golia these days, which is like the go-to. But in your mind, what is search and how important it is for a docs website?
So we just finished November Search Month in the AstroDocs. We got our first real Algolia data dump, I guess, a month ago, and analyzed what people were searching for on our site, which search, what things were people searching for that actually they didn't come up with any or any good search results at all. So this has been a month of working on search for us, and it's actually been really interesting in what's happened as a result of that. So then this month, what we were doing was using those to see, oh, you're searching for script and then this is coming up, but we don't want people to go there if they're searching just the word script. They probably want something way more basic than the link it was trying to go to. But because there was something in a header somewhere that happened to use actually, I think with script in particular, it was catching a lot of TypeScript because we didn't have good script content that was highly prioritized by Algolia. So people were searching how to do like a script tag, and they were getting sent to pages about TypeScript in the docs. So what we ended up doing was not only creating a brand new page specifically to tackle scripts and on clicks and event handlers, but it also changed how we wrote and how we think about writing our headings in docs. Because Algolia is going to prioritize words that are in a heading or words that are in a page title. As soon as we put this tutorial in, and the tutorial has lots of headings because it's, again, small sections, it's trying to be very explicit about what you're doing, but we don't necessarily want our docs readers to be lifted right into the middle of the tutorial somewhere. We'd rather they get to the appropriate docs page. So we've actually spent this entire month dealing with issues just like that. How do we get the tutorial results deprioritized? Do we actually change some of our headings in some places in the docs because of how Algolia is treating it? Um, I'm writing some new material right now, and every time I write a heading in my mind, I'm like, oh wait, Algolia is going to do this. No, I better change this heading. So it's actually really fascinating, and it's something that we've been working on just this entire month.
Wow. You know, I bet you all have like a docs lab at Astro where you all just research on the next best way to write documentations because like that sounds like an exciting experiment really like the care you have to go to like see. that folks are searching for stuff, but they're getting something else, and how to fix that. That's a whole other level of care. So we've been gone for an hour, and I think you're just getting started. I am not exhausted, but we have to keep the space under an hour 30 to give you back your time. Like, this is a masterclass. Like I said, you should write a book. You should
Well,
write a book, Sarah.
I don't want to keep you and I don't want to keep the listeners, but I do want to just continue off right off what you said. So even if this
Mhm.
is the last thing that
Yeah,
that
sure,
we
sure. Go
address,
ahead. Go ahead, please.
um, is the AstroDocs lab. It's an open and it's a transparent lab. We are so community focused at AstroDocs. If you come into our Astro Discord, you can actually go in and you can grab yourself a Discord role that is Team Docs, and we've got over 150 people there. And yeah, it's like my community choir. It's open source. You come, you give yourself the rule. And so what we did with this Algolia search data was we knew we had like 20 terms, our most searched terms from Algolia. And it's a lot for, the smaller team of maintainers working on the docs to sit and search every term and then analyze, okay, which links are coming up. So we put a call out to Team Docs. I pinged Team Docs in our Docs channel. We created a pinned GitHub issue that listed the 20-ish terms. We said, look, we're looking for people to pick a term, search it, and then here's like a list of 5, report back. Here's like 5 questions you could answer, but you don't really have to stick to them. Just if you're, wondering what kind of information we're looking for, how it could be helpful. Yeah, and that issue is pinned in the AstroDocs GitHub repo. And yeah, community members have been coming in, just grabbing a search term, searching it in our docs, and then reporting back on what they found, answering questions like, um, okay, was the most useful search result actually the number 1 position or no? Were any of them useful? Were any of them surprising? Is there a page in our docs that you know of that didn't show up as a search result? Um, Things like that to save us, going through them individually. And then our team of maintainers could look at those results and see, what content architecture and what writing had to change to accommodate what people were actually searching for. So it was a huge community effort, actually, and everyone is that pinned issue is still there. And I'm sure there's still some juicy search terms that haven't been taken yet. So anyone's welcome to contribute.
Hmm. So I think you might have misunderstood me, Sarah. We are not ending anytime soon because I know you still have a lot to tell.
Okay.
So, so please, we are not like
Okay, no, I'm not
I'm
going anywhere. I just want to make sure.
I'm yeah. So yeah. So first things first, I am in the Astro Discord, and trust me, if you all want to learn about documentation and how to like even running a community, the Astro Discord is one of the best I've been at in terms of structure and how to contribute to stuff. And those roles you could be on the docs team. So it's like a community choir, like she said. Everyone can participate, right? And everyone can do stuff. So I've pasted the link on the comment section. You could join the Discord, and that's the beauty of open source because now you have access to how as to build documentations for free, and you could take that knowledge to make yourself a better docs developer or a better technical writer, and you have all that so easy and so accessible. So you all could join the Discord, and yeah, you could reach out to Sarah in the Discord, or just reach out to the docs team, or just sit in on conversations about the dogs and just learn a whole lot. All right. So yeah. So let's go to the Q&A section because I could keep this going for another 2 hours, but let's open the floor up to people who have been listening in and let them ask their questions. So if you have any questions for Sarah, we've been going for an hour 9 minutes now, just talking about different aspects of the dogs. Do you have any questions on that note? So this is your time to just ask about documentations to the Queen of Dogs, like I said. So request the mic, I would bring you up and you just ask questions. I think I saw one that I bookmarked. Okay, yeah. Okay, okay. So I think. Hmm, so the question is, how do you focus on documentation while coding takes much of the time to complete the project?
Yep, that can be a difficulty as well. So at Astra, we do have a team, um, and so I migrated more towards the docs side of it myself. So one answer is if you have a team and you can allocate resources, then you can give people primarily responsibilities that way. Another, so there's two other strategies I'll mention that would work even if you don't have a team. So the first is it's very common in docs that are valued by the project, where a new release does not go out until corresponding documentation is done. So done includes docs. So that's one thing you can do is you can, even if it's just your little project, if you set yourself a rule, nope, I'm not allowed to make a new release until I've at least updated the README, added a note in the change log about this feature. You can sort of self-monitor yourself that way. The second idea that I'll throw at you is a great development technique. You could experiment with docs driven development. So instead of just test driven development, instead of writing tests first and making sure your code passes, what if you wrote your idealized versions of the docs first, and those docs become part of your test suite for the new feature? So one thing that happens when we're documenting, when at Astra, where we have different teams and we have dev and we have docs, is I will have to document a feature. So I will need to figure out how it works. So I will play around with how it works, and I'll be like, really? Is this how it's supposed to work? I'm like, this isn't a great story for me to tell my readers. And so then we negotiate, and sometimes dev actually takes its cue from docs, because docs can point out that's not really a nice comprehensive narrative to send to the users. So one thing you could do is you could try writing your docs first, rather than once you've finished your feature and you've shipped your code and you're like, oh, okay, oh no, wait, I got docs to get to. No, you did them first. And you wrote your best version of the docs because you wrote the thing you really wanted to create and the thing that you wanted to share with your readers. So I will put that challenge out there. And if you do that, then ping me and tell me, because I'll be fascinated to hear how it went.
Oh my God. Masterclass again. You know, where did you hear the term from? Docs driven development. Like, is that your term? I wouldn't be shocked if it is.
I don't know. I don't know if anybody else has used it. I mean, we have everything driven development, right? Why not docs driven development?
Yeah, we should start a movement since they are moving. The docs driven development. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm thinking about the the implication of it, because now you have focus on what you're building. Like, you have written the docs of what this is, so you actually know that the output should match the docs when you're engineering. That's wild. Oh, this is such good stuff. So yeah, you all should come ask your question, or should I just go and keep writing as I'm doing? So if you have a question on docs, please request the mic, or you want to contribute. This is the time to do that. And Sarah has just been giving us a masterclass. You all, I hope you all are writing. Like, I have Notion open and writing a lot, so I think we have Too Smart in here. That this should go into a blog post, Sarah. and I would quote you if I do manage to form one. Like seriously, like I could just take one section of this and just like get into an article mode, especially the four pillars. I hope you all still remember, and the most important one of it is correct. All right, not complete, but correct. All right, we have clear, we have discoverable, and navigable. Amazing. So, too smart. Could you introduce yourself, meet your mic, and let's hear what you have to say, please.
Yes, sir. This actually sounds a lot like behavior-driven development, which is
Okay.
BDD. It's basically you would document what you're wanting to do, much the way she mentioned, and you use a gherkin syntax, and that can be used to generate actual tests or the test template. Uh, if you want to look into BDD and SpecFlow, there is something very similar to what she's speaking of, but we've implemented BDD at our company, and it's been really working out well. It encourages tests, but the documentation is written in such a way that the business or a non-technical person basically understands the gist of what your code is trying to accomplish. But then it's up to the developer to actually to turn that business language into code, and the code becomes very business readable. Uh, I'm 100% supporting what she's talking about. This is just probably another variation.
Yeah. Thank you. I just checked out BDD, and I think it's an Asia software development process. Yes. I
I
think.
I got introduced to it. It was actually an English person, someone from over in England, was teaching some courses on it. I'm not
Okay.
sure if it originated from Asia or not, but it's been very successful from what I understand.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Liz Keogh and Chris Matz, they're really big in the BDD community. Yep.
Yeah. So I meant age out, but I get it. But I still love dogs driven better. So we are gonna push this movement, Sarah. Or I will at least. Yeah. So thank you a lot, Too Smart, for that. I definitely would check that out and just see how it marries. So dogs driven development pioneered by Sarah, the dog's queen. Yeah. So I think we have Simon. How you doing, Simon?
Hey Kelvin, how
Yeah.
are you?
I'm good. So if you all don't know, Simon is dev advocate at Platformatic. He's a friend of mine. So just saying that a shout out. Thank you for hanging up, Simon.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah. This has been a really great space so far. I've really been enjoying it. So, the question I have for you, Sarah, is, um, yeah, first of all, just to echo what Kelvin's been saying about the fantastic documentation you have on Estro, it's really inspiring, and you and the team clearly put a lot of care into the documentation. And I've just been kind of looking at how you kind of accept contributions. I can see that you have a writing guide, but I'm just kind of interested. You obviously have very high standards, and you've kind of worked up and built that up over time. And you mentioned things like tone of voice and how you approach that. And I wondered how you kind of, whilst accepting open source contributions from people all over the place, um, with varying sort of levels of experience, say with technical writing, how you kind of maintain that quality and while still being welcoming to contributors.
Well, thanks for the kind words about the docs, and thank you for the question, and thank you for validating the question, because my talk at Write the Docs Australia is going to be Thursday/Friday, depending on the time zone you're in, and that's the topic of my talk, is balancing community contributions with high standards for quality of the docs. So I have a whole talk that's going to air Thursday night for me. It'll be Friday in Australia. And it's challenging, but that takes us a little bit out of the technical writing space and a bit into the docs lead community management space, because that was something that I struggled with when I first took over the role. I had been a private tutor. I'd done a lot of math tutoring, but I'd also done a lot of essay editing or helping students with their applications. So I was used to editing other people's work. I was used to giving suggestions, but it was always in the context of someone had asked me to help them improve. And in open source, that's not necessarily the mindset that your contributors walk in with. So it has been a learning experience for me how to do all this in public in open source. So a lot of it is going from the understanding that, you know, the contributions that you receive via PRs, sometimes these, we like to call them unsolicited PRs, the PR author thought there was value in this contribution and they took the time to contribute it. So the key is, can you identify what's in the PR that is helpful to your readers, to your documentation, and how can you use that and then help onboard the reader, the PR author rather, into your docs process to help them make more PRs, because you want PRs from other people. And it's a challenge. Sometimes you have to be a little tactful, but at the core of it, this person thought this was a valuable contribution. This person took the time to contribute to your docs. Those are things you want to capitalize on. When I said earlier that your docs don't need to be complete because someone will come along and tell you when they're not complete, this is the moment that we're waiting for. Incomplete docs are not a crime. They're an invitation for your community to contribute. So yes, I have a whole talk about how we deal with that. But at its core, it's understanding that every PR you receive is an opportunity to better communicate to your community what kind of PRs are helpful to your docs. So when you get a PR that's not quite up to standards, sometimes it's figuring out a little bit about the person. Can you figure out what motivates them? Like, are they looking to be helpful? You know, are they, sometimes they're looking to show off their own technical prowess, but so they give you something that's way too complicated to go in your docs. So if you can figure out what part of it is useful for the docs and what's motivating the contributor to take their time and give you something, then it's about trying to find the match. And just remembering that incomplete docs are an invitation to your community, and everything you receive is an opportunity to better communicate to your community about what your standards are. So that's the short version. But thank you for that question, because that makes me feel like, oh good, maybe somebody does want to hear about this next week.
Amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I hope there's a recording of that talk, or I get to watch that. And I really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I like the fact you say incomplete dogs are invitation to the community. That blew my mind. Like, you're good at this stuff. I know that, but I love your thought process. It's amazing. So I think we have Michael with a question. How you doing, Michael?
Uh, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Hi, Kelvin. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for hosting this space. So the question I had is, when does information get too much, or when does the page get too long? Because I've noticed there are two, or let's say there are a couple of spectrums in the dev community. There are people that want a lot of information about the project, and then there are people that just want the nitty gritty and just get straight to the point. So when is it too much?
Thanks, Michael. It's a great question, and it is one we struggle with. I find that in Astro, some of our developers are the of the Control F mindset. They believe they can hit Control F and find, and they like it when everything's all on one page. because they'll get there. And as someone who takes a different approach and would rather see things a little more structured and pages broken out, it is something that we have to negotiate. I will say one thing that, so here's one, again, Doc's tip that we learned is that material content that's hidden under like a detailed summary block is not available by Control F. So one strategy we experimented with was, okay, what if we have expanding details to tackle this problem? And I can tell you that we should not have expanding details to tackle this problem because it thwarted our Control F users. Now, the collapsing details have their place when it's more incidental knowledge, but we have tended to not use them in our docs. So we've had to, that was one thing we tried, didn't work, choosing a different strategy. I will err on the side of less on a page if I can, but at the minimum, the page organization and navigation can help you go a long way. If you really feel like you can't take stuff off a page, the AstroDocs have, and on this page, we have a right-hand sidebar that is the all the level 2 and 3 headings on the page. So you can see where in the page we are. You can see a table of contents at a glance. And that has been our sort of medium-term solution for the pages that have got too long. And it's a good check for us. So not only is it helpful for you, the reader, to know where you are within the page, it's a good check for us that when that right sidebar gets a little too long and a little too challenging and overwhelming to look at, that is feedback for us that maybe there's too much on this one page. The other thing I'll say to that is if you're getting too much information on one page, sometimes it can help to think about how you are actually separating information into different pages to begin with. So it can be common at the start of a project to be very feature-based, and sometimes that becomes difficult because you want to write everything about this one particular package all on one page. But then what happens is you run the risk of it's difficult for the people who need to know something about your package, but different things about your package, right? Some people are expecting to go into a reference, a very dry, minimal reference doc, and pull that out of a reference page. Some people are expecting a guide to walk through an example. And when it's all on the same page, it might not be serving anyone. So taking the mindset of who's landing on this page, what are they trying to do, can help decide whether some of that information can actually be taken off that page in the first place. So I hope that gives you a little something.
Okay, thank you. And then another question that I have is, lately I've been writing documentation for the Solid.js library. So I've been trying to get my mind in the mindset of both an advanced developer looking for something quick and easy, and both a beginner developer just looking for something to get me started and explaining the more technical terms in easy to understand English. So how do I keep shifting from advanced to beginner, and where do I, should I say, draw the line, suppose?
Ah, good question. So how do you compartmentalize as a writer yourself when you're trying to deal with different perspectives? Yeah, it's certainly context switch, and if it can help, then you can do things like maybe say, okay, today I'm only writing introductory guides. You know, so there's little things you can do with your own headspace to say, okay, today this is what I'm focusing on. And then if you're doing that, you can read your past work that you've done that's of similar type. You can go search other docs for exactly that type of thing. You can do lots of things to get you in a particular headspace to do your writing. Um, and then remembering that, not everything is going to get written. You're going to have to prioritize. So maybe choose what you're going to work on in a way that supports how you work. So I find that I do a lot of my best, really deep technical writing in the morning. I just happen to be that way. I get up early, I feel really fresh. I don't know whether it's, the stresses of an entire day, and then as it gets later, um, I feel like maybe I'm not as forgiving as I could be, or maybe I'm a little quicker to anger. And so I'm like, okay, I don't want to write the stuff that needs me to be really super handholdy at the end of the day, or things like that. So I would also suggest sort of a little bit of self monitoring, and just allow yourself to get into headspaces and allow yourself to write in a way that seems to work with your natural rhythms as well. Maybe that would help.
Okay, okay. Thank you. That was great advice. Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, thank you for answering, Michael. Um, yeah, so thank you, Sarah. So, yeah, we are coming to the end. I said an hour, 30 minutes ish, and this has been a great masterclass, Sarah. Like I wouldn't call it just a Twitter space. It's a masterclass on docs. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, well, thank you for setting this up, and thank you for having me, and thanks to everybody who listened and who asked questions. And remember, anyone can be a member of Team Docs. We're
Mm,
open.
yeah, the link to the Discord is in the comments, folks. You all go hang out there and join the Astro team docs and try out Astro. Really, like this is me telling you to. It's a great product, really. So yeah, we in the absence of every other question, we are gonna end the space in a bit. So do you have like the final words for us? You know, general advice, whatever you want to say, just go for it, please.
Oh no, so much pressure. I have to summarize everything at the end. I would just say documentation again is about trying to recreate that conversation with the reader. It's all about the reader. It's not about writing the big fancy words that you like. It's not about trying to show off because this thing is going to be in public. It's about trying to understand and have empathy for your reader. And above all, you are trying to be helpful. If I have to make a judgment call at any point in my writing, in maintaining the docs, in dealing with the community, ultimately, I am always evaluating everything under the frame of, is this helpful? Because I think that's what we try to do with docs.
So thank you a lot, Sarah. So you all go follow Sarah if you have documentations, questions, and all. But just give her a follow. She's great and documentations, and check out Astro as well. And yeah, so thank you everybody for coming to my special guest space with Sarah, the Queen of the Dogs. And I hope you all have learned a lot, like I did on this. And you all have a wonderful day. It's end of day here in Nigeria, so it's about 8:34 p.m. But wherever you are, have a great day. And thank you once more, Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing. So bye everybody.